In my past life, the top student in our grade, my childhood friend Lucas, and a transfer student Sophia fell passionately in love. For her, Lucas started skipping classes, smoking, drinking, and getting into fights. His grades plummeted drastically. In the end, his mother, Mrs. Taylor, stepped in and sent the transfer student Sophia back on the right path. Lucas went on to a bright future and eventually married me. I thought my years of unrequited love had finally paid off. But to my shock, just before I was about to give birth, Lucas beat me so severely that my water broke, leading to massive blood loss and my death. His crazed expression haunted me as he screamed, "Do you even realize, Emma? It was because of you that Sophia's awful husband killed her. Your perfect life was built on her suffering. She's dead, so you don't deserve to live either." When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in my senior year of high school. Lucas stood leaning against a wall, warning me with a smug grin, just as I remembered. That day, I had smiled at them and offered my blessing. Youth is meant to be reckless. Only a fiery, passionate romance can make it truly worthwhile. I hope you two stay miserable together forever. At the time, Lucas and Sophia were inseparable, envied by everyone. "Aren't they the perfect couple?" someone said from nearby. "Isn't that Lucas Taylor and his girlfriend? Wow, I'm so jealous." "And who's that over there?" another asked. "You don't know? That's Emma Green, who's been chasing Lucas for years but hasn't won him over. So shameless." Their mocking voices carried clearly, as if they wanted to make sure I heard every word. In my previous life, when Lucas asked to meet me, I had foolishly thought he was finally going to confess his feelings. I had even prepared a small gift for him. Instead, he showed up with Sophia to warn me off. "Emma, if you dare bully Sophia again, don't blame me for forgetting we were childhood friends," he had said coldly. Sophia, nestled in his arms, wiped away non-existent tears, looking heartbreakingly pitiful. I couldn't deny her beauty. She was alluring, no doubt about it, which explained why Lucas was so captivated by her. Back then, I had longed to be the one in his arms. Now, looking at the two of them, I could barely hold back my disdain. Rolling my eyes, I recalled the root of their hatred for me. Oh, right. It was because I'd uploaded photos of Sophia drinking and partying onto the school forum. With a cheeky grin, I said, "Fine, Lucas, I'll back off now. Youth is meant to be reckless. Only a fiery, passionate romance can make it worthwhile. I hope you two stay miserable together forever." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, not bothering to engage with them any further. Even as I left, Sophia froze, cautiously watching me, afraid I might pull some trick to steal her precious boyfriend. How ridiculous. In my previous life, Lucas had killed me during my pregnancy, causing my water to break and leading to my death from blood loss. Such a scumbag. If I could relive my life, I wouldn't just refuse to forgive him. I'd stomp on him if I had the chance. Life is precious, and this second chance is something I intend to cherish. Packed my things, took a leave of absence, and decided to embrace the joys of youth fully. How could you dare upload Sophia's photos to the forum? Aren't you afraid her husband will get mad? My best friend, Summer, teased. "Summer, say that again. He's my husband." I grabbed her ear, correcting her as I refused to acknowledge such a disgusting title. "This isn't the classy Emma Green the first no. You don't remember how pathetic you used to look? Even I wanted to punch you back then." Summer sighed dramatically. I couldn't help but feel ashamed for my past self. Me, the sole heiress of the Green family, lowering my status for Lucas Taylor, trailing behind him like a lovesick puppy, even disappointing my parents. Never again. I'll make full use of everything I have now, for myself and for my parents. It's not like I wanted to take those photos of Sophia at the party. She threatened me first. There's no way I'd let that go. I hadn't finished speaking when Summer nudged me playfully. "Look, isn't that your husband and his precious girlfriend over there?" She pointed toward the corner of the cafeteria. Sure enough, there was Lucas cheering on Sophia. She stood out even in the hazy, smoke-filled surroundings, dressed in a way that highlighted her purity, looking different from the other girls around her. She only had eyes for Lucas, and he couldn't resist her charm. Skipping class, drinking, smoking, fighting. He did it all for her. Poor Mrs. Taylor. If she knew, she'd be heartbroken again. Check it out. The forum is blowing up. Summer waved her phone in front of me, looking as gleeful as she did in my past life. What's your plan now? She asked. In my previous life, I had been dragged down by Sophia countless times. Her schemes had eventually led to my death at Lucas's hands. But this time, I was ready. My plan? To play along. Of course, I said, opening a rarely used contact on my phone. In my past life, I had suspected Lucas of cheating after our marriage and had hired a private investigator to dig into his affairs. This time, it seems my role is entirely different. Are you going to study abroad or not? I asked Summer. In my past life, I stayed in the same city as Lucas after high school, abandoning my dream of seeing the world just to be with him. After we got married, he outright forbade me from pursuing it. That dream remained shelved until my death. Are you going or not? I pressed her again. If you're going, I'll go too. Summer replied absent-mindedly, her eyes fixed on the cake in front of her, clearly uninterested in my questions. We quickly agreed 2 months from now, we'd set off, traveling to a few places first before settling at a school abroad. By the time people were still swooning over Lucas and Sophia as the perfect couple, we'd already be lounging on a sunny island, sipping cocktails and living our best lives. But Sophia, for some reason, couldn't seem to let me go. At Lucas's birthday banquet, she appeared in a deep red gown adorned with sparkling crystals. The dress was as flashy as it was suggestive. I only attended because I didn't want to upset Mrs. Taylor. My plan was to remain invisible throughout the event. Sophia, however, had other ideas. The moment Mrs. Taylor stepped away, she came over to me, holding a glass of wine. Emma, just delete the photos. Lucas and I can forgive you if you do, she said sweetly. You can even come hang out with us in the future. How kind of her. Already imagining herself as the lady of the house. She leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing maliciously as she whispered in a voice only I could hear. You know Lucas always listens to me. Some people are just rotten to the core, no matter how well they pretend otherwise. I wasn't fazed. Looks like you've been watching me more than your husband. What? Sophia? Are you secretly in love with me? I replied with a smirk. By the way, I'm not going anywhere. Bring it on. Lucas had been nearby, quietly listening to everything without intervening. His expression flickered with something unfamiliar. Maybe frustration. He looked at me darkly, his tone low. Emma, didn't you hear Sophia talking to you? If you don't delete those photos, don't blame me for what happens next, he warned, narrowing his eyes in a ridiculous display of hostility. I felt a chill run down my spine, not from fear, but from sheer disgust. Don't rush, Sophia. Your karma is coming. Lucas, you'll get yours too, I said casually, my voice dripping with mockery. In my previous life, I had been a lamb to the slaughter. Now, I was the one holding the scales of justice against these two. Sophia's smug expression vanished the moment someone else approached us, and she immediately softened her tone. Lucas, don't blame her, she said, putting on a show of understanding and grace. Sophia was cunning and manipulative, always making the most of every resource at her disposal to climb higher. If you didn't know her true nature, you'd be completely taken in by her act. I took those photos myself. Why should I delete them? Besides, this is far from over, I said, leaving my words deliberately vague. The atmosphere grew tense until Mrs. Taylor called Lucas over to greet some guests. Reluctantly, he led Sophia away, maintaining a distance from me as though afraid Mrs. Taylor might misunderstand our relationship. If he could have been 800 meters away from me, he would have done it, as if I wanted to see him anyway. Sophia, ever the actress, waited for a moment before patting Lucas on the shoulder with a gentle smile. All right, Lucas, don't get upset with your mom. Let's go together. Mrs. Taylor closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her usually elegant brows furrowing in frustration. The guests, oblivious to who Lucas was holding on to, began their usual fawning. Meanwhile, I took the opportunity to slip out of the suffocating venue unnoticed. Just as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed with a message. Miss Green, everything has been taken care of as instructed. It read, I had contacted a private investigator, AAA, to stir up trouble. The timing was perfect. As soon as the drama broke out at school, Sophia had been hiding, too afraid to face the consequences. By now, several burly men with tattoos snaking up their arms had cornered the school gates, shouting, "Sophia, come out here. You think you can scam me out of my money and just run off?" Their threatening presence drew a crowd, and Summer tugged at my arm, eager to watch the chaos unfold. As I observed the scene, a sense of familiarity crept over me. These were the same thugs from my previous life, Sophia's abusive husband's cronies. I sent a double payment to the investigator as a reward for finding Sophia's enemies to stir things up. I hadn't expected them to show up so spectacularly. Justice may be delayed, but it will always come, I thought with satisfaction as the men continued shouting, their curses echoing through the gates. The commotion quickly drew the attention of the school's security. Unable to remain hidden any longer, Sophia had no choice but to seek Lucas's help. "Lucas, please help me. I didn't mean for things to turn out this way," she pleaded, clinging to his arm. As she spoke, she glanced in my direction, her eyes filled with hatred. Sophia was determined to pin the blame on me, her convenient scapegoat. This time, though, she wasn't wrong. I was the one who orchestrated it. I cast her a look of approval. "Didn't you say you'd never interact with them again, Emma?" Summer teased, grinning mischievously. Before Lucas could say anything, the thugs surrounding Sophia's trembling figure started yelling loudly, moving toward our direction. I wasn't interested in watching Lucas play the dashing hero, swooping in to save his damsel in distress. Turning on my heel, I walked away. Summer quickly caught up, practically bouncing with curiosity, her excitement almost cartoonishly evident. "You're not staying to see Sophia's true colors exposed? Shouldn't you be thrilled?" she asked, smirking. "Am I that petty?" I scoffed. "Sophia is the star of her own drama, playing the heroine in this little rescue act with Lucas. Let's not ruin their fun." We walked away, heading against the flow of the crowd gathering to watch the chaos. From a distance, I could hear the men shouting accusations, demanding Sophia come out and face them. "Lucas has his fancy title, his pretty face, and his brain for academics," I said. "But let's be honest, he's got nothing else. His methods for bailing out his precious Sophia are so tired and predictable." "True," Summer chimed in. "But if Sophia and Lucas keep pulling stunts like this, it won't be long before Mrs. Taylor steps in. When that happens, it's game over for them, and even if nothing serious happens, ruining their reputation will be a breeze." We hadn't walked far before the sound of sirens filled the air, followed by an ambulance rushing past us. I glanced back briefly. It seemed the confrontation had escalated, and someone had gotten hurt. Most likely, Mrs. Taylor would once again swoop in to clean up Lucas's mess. Pulling back the rose-tinted glasses of my past life, I finally saw Lucas for what he truly was. The disgust I felt for him was overwhelming. Not long after, Lucas showed up at my house. He reeked of alcohol, and before I could even ask who was at the door, he pushed his way in, slamming me against the wall. The stench of liquor hit me like a wave. In my past life, this might have made my heart flutter, and I probably would have leaned into him like a love-struck fool. But now, I wasn't that same girl anymore. "What do you think you're doing?" I snapped, pushing him off. He slumped against me, his breath hot on my neck, making me uncomfortable. His words slurred together, and I couldn't tell if he was truly drunk or just pretending. "Emma, you don't understand," he mumbled. "She's not like that. Sophia is kind and sweet." Before he could finish his sentence, he gagged and leaned closer, ready to vomit. "Ugh, if you're going to throw up, do it somewhere else." I shoved him aside, covering my mouth in disgust. Instead of moving away, he grabbed my hand and held it tightly. "When I was little, my parents fought all the time. They almost divorced. I ran away from home that night," he started, his voice raw. I froze, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. "Sophia, she stayed with me all night in the cold. Her didn't leave me alone," he continued, his grip on my hand tightening. "So that's what this was about." I remembered the incident. He'd been stubborn even back then, refusing to go home despite the freezing weather. He even made me promise not to tell anyone. Afraid of upsetting him, I'd foolishly stayed with him under the slide, braving the bitter cold until morning. By the time I couldn't take it anymore and ran to his house for help, Lucas had nearly frozen. If I hadn't caved when I did, he might not have survived to be the arrogant man he was now. As he slumped in my arms, his usual overconfidence and idiocy seemed to fade. For a moment, he was quiet, almost vulnerable. "So, I'm your guiding light." "Huh," I muttered under my breath, half joking. "And here I thought I was the villain in your little love story with Sophia." It didn't matter anymore, though. "Sophia's a great person," he said, his voice soft. "I like her, and I owe her. But why did you leave?" "Wait, what?" I blinked, confused. My irritation returned immediately, shoving him onto the couch. I wiped away the thin sheen of sweat forming on my forehead. "Who told you anything?" "My mom," he mumbled, trying to inch closer again. That explained it. Mrs. Taylor had always been kind to me, regardless of how terrible Lucas could be. If it weren't for the awkward situation of her son being the wedge between us, I could have seen us becoming friends. "Lucas, this has nothing to do with you. Leave," I ordered, pushing him toward the door. Taking advantage of his momentary drunken confusion, I shoved him out and locked the door. His pounding on the door quickly became muffled as I put in my earbuds, pretending not to hear him. He passed out on the sidewalk. That was none of my concern. Just then, Summer called me on video chat. "Emma, check this out," she said excitedly as the call connected. She sent me a screenshot, and when I opened it, my confusion quickly turned to anger. It was a post from Sophia's social media account, showing her at the headquarters of Green Enterprises, my family's company. The caption read, "Spending my holiday learning at Dad and Mom's company. Tag, work hard, play hard." The comments were flooded with praise, calling her a perfect young lady and marveling at her family background. What the hell? First, she steals my place as Lucas's angel, and now she's claiming my parents as her own. I fumed. You can't blame me for being ruthless when you were heartless first. I turned back to my computer and composed an email. The invitation was addressed to Miss Sophia Green, heiress of the Green family, formally inviting her to attend the Taylor family banquet as a special guest and announcing her relationship with Lucas. Her public humiliation would begin there. Everything I suffered in my previous life, I would make sure she experienced it all. The Taylor estate was brightly lit for the banquet. Uniformed staff moved seamlessly through the rooms, serving plates of exquisite pastries and glasses of champagne. Though it was still early, a few scattered guests had already arrived, chatting softly in the living room as the crisp clink of champagne glasses filled the air. I put on a rarely worn evening gown, arriving at the Taylor's home well in advance. My primary goal was to speak with Mrs. Taylor one last time and bid her goodbye. "Emma, don't worry," Mrs. Taylor assured me warmly. "Today, I made sure there wouldn't be any outsiders." She placed special emphasis on the word outsiders, clearly hinting at someone. I nodded obediently, offering her a sweet smile. "It's fine, Auntie. I just came to say goodbye." Mrs. Taylor squeezed my hand gently. "You have my support. Let me know if you need anything. Oh, and there's a property in Italy. It's yours if you want it. Once the banquet is over, we'll grab the keys together." She genuinely treated me like a daughter, and for that, I was grateful. More guests began to arrive, gathering around Mrs. Taylor to raise their glasses. The atmosphere became lively, with laughter and conversation filling the space. I wasn't used to attending events like this and only mingled briefly before slipping away when Mrs. Taylor excused herself to change into a new outfit. In the quieter space of the garden, I overheard a heated argument. "Do you even know who I am? How dare you stop me?" A sharp, arrogant voice rang out. It was unmistakably Sophia's. "I'm sorry, miss." A bodyguard responded stoically. Mrs. Taylor gave strict orders. No unauthorized individuals are allowed in. Sophia, being Sophia, whipped out her phone to call Lucas. After a quick glance at the caller ID, the guard reluctantly let her through. Sophia strutted into the banquet hall, her entrance attracting curious stares. Her overly sweet smile masked the fiery temper she had shown just moments ago. "Hello, everyone. she greeted warmly, attempting to blend in. To her credit, she didn't announce her identity outright, instead waiting expectantly for someone to formally introduce her. But the room remained silent. After an awkward few seconds, the other guests resumed their conversations, leaving her standing awkwardly alone. Sophia didn't seem to notice, or more likely, pretended not to. She tried inserting herself into various groups, her audacious demeanor somehow making her seem adaptable. I had to admit, shamelessness could indeed be a skill. "Emma, I didn't expect to see you here," she called out suddenly, as though I was the one out of place. Feigning innocence, she added, "Didn't the school's punishment teach you a lesson?" The incident she referred to had caused quite a stir. The last time Sophia had stirred up trouble, it led to a school investigation. She'd been expelled, while Lucas was suspended for weeks. He hadn't stepped foot back on campus since. Mentioning it now, a flicker of resentment crossed her face before she quickly changed the subject. "Emma, your dress looks a lot like mine," she said with feigned surprise, loud enough for others to overhear. "No, wait. It's slightly different." Her words immediately drew attention. It was rare to see matching outfits at such events, and her remark hinted at an intentional clash. She covered her mouth lightly with her hand, as if embarrassed. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I didn't notice before. Everyone's circumstances are different, I suppose," she said, her tone dripping with false pity. I smiled coolly. "Circumstances may vary, but I don't wear knockoffs. And this dress isn't exactly cheap." Sophia's face stiffened, but she quickly regained her composure. "It's not about the price, Emma," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "What matters is what's inside." "Exactly," I replied, refusing to back down. "And what's inside should match the outfit. If you want to compare appearances, I'll raise you. Let's compare substance instead." Grabbing her hand gently, I added with mock concern, "Sophia, your outfit suits you perfectly. That's all that matters. Whether it's real or fake doesn't change that." Her expression darkened visibly, though she tried to keep her composure in front of the other guests. "Emma, what are you talking about? My parents would never buy me anything fake," she said defensively, her voice a touch louder than necessary. That moment, someone in the crowd chimed in. "By the way, may I ask what your father does for a living?" The question hung in the air, and Sophia's face paled slightly. "My father is the CEO of Green Enterprises," Sophia declared confidently, her voice ringing out loud enough for everyone to hear. As expected, she took the bait. The room fell silent, and everyone exchanged curious glances, unsure whether to believe her bold claim. Even though I'd already anticipated her shamelessness, I was still taken aback by how effortlessly she stole my identity. Did she think I didn't have parents and had to borrow hers? "Sophia, stop embarrassing yourself," I said coldly, my eyes narrowing. "We both know I'm the real daughter of the Green family. Pretending won't make it true." Sophia, unfazed, placed a hand delicately on her chest as if offended by my silent accusation. "Emma, how could you say such a thing? If you don't believe me, I can call the company right now." Under the watchful eyes of the guests, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. After a brief pause, the line connected, and a polite, professional voice answered. "Good afternoon, Green Enterprises. How may I help you?" Sophia didn't hesitate. "This is Sophia Green. Where is my father?" The room went deathly quiet as everyone strained to catch every word. "Mr. Green is currently in a meeting," the voice replied. "Would you like me to leave him a message?" Sophia hung up with a self-satisfied smile, looking around at the crowd. "You see, I really am the Green family heiress. And as for my engagement to Lucas Taylor, why would I make such things up?" She batted her eyelashes innocently, radiating the perfect image of a pitiable and virtuous young woman. Even after being reborn, I found myself astonished by her boundless audacity. Sophia seemed addicted to stealing. First my identity, then my parents. Sophia's words caused a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A woman dressed in a garish gold outfit stepped forward, clearly on Sophia's side. "Young lady, you don't need to pretend to be someone else," she said, her tone both condescending and supportive of Sophia. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at the absurdity of it all. Pretend? Me? You've really got your head in the clouds, don't you? I shot back. Another guest joined in, chastising Sophia. There's no need to make things so awkward. The real Green family heiress is right here. You should step aside. Exactly. You seem like a decent enough person. But I can't believe you do something so shameless. Someone else chimed in. The tide was turning against Sophia. But she didn't give up. Her smug expression returned, confident she could talk her way out of this. But this time, I wasn't going to let her win. Sophia's victory was short-lived as Lucas finally arrived. Fashionably late. Why is everyone gathered here? He asked. His gaze shifting uneasily when he spotted Sophia. For a moment, his expression wavered, but he quickly moved to her side, instinctively shielding her. Sophia, what are you doing here? He asked, glancing around nervously, clearly looking for his mother. The fear of Mrs. Taylor catching them together was evident. A bystander stepped forward and explained. This young lady claimed to be the Green family heiress and Lucas Taylor's fiancée. She's been rather disrespectful and even dared to attend the Taylor banquet uninvited. Lucas's gaze darted between me and Sophia, disbelief written all over his face. Despite being childhood friends, he seemed to have completely forgotten that I was the real heiress. Sophia had clearly gambled on the fact that few people had met me in person and assumed no one could expose her lie. But Lucas, at least, should have known better. After all, we'd grown up together. This time, her lie would backfire spectacularly. Lucas, ever the fool, tried to smooth things over. This is all just a misunderstanding. I think Sophia might be a little confused, he said, turning to me with a pleading look. Can't we just let this go? I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. Really? Lucas, you're still covering for her? Maybe we should stop calling you Mr. Bold and start calling you Mr. Gullible. Before Lucas could respond, a melodious voice cut through the tension. Miss Green, your dress is absolutely stunning. Is it one of Dia's classic designs? I couldn't get my hands on it when it was released. A woman in a dark green gown adorned with sparkling diamonds approached gracefully. Her elegance was undeniable, though there was a playful boldness in her demeanor. I recognized her instantly. It was Vivian, Lucas's aunt. I'd met her a few times when I was younger, and she'd always been lively and full of charm, sneaking us out for burgers when no one was looking. You're still as beautiful as ever, Aunt Vivian, I said with a smile, falling naturally into conversation with her. She smiled warmly, placing a hand on my arm. And you've grown into such a lovely young woman. Emma, it's been too long. Just 2 sentences from her were enough to ease the tension. The tide was clearly turning back in my favor, and I couldn't wait to see how Sophia planned to wriggle out of this one. She pulled me into a half embrace, a grin spreading across her face. You've grown so much, Emma, but your sweet little compliments haven't changed a bit. The crowd looked on as we chatted, clearly confused. Few people here knew me, but there were even fewer who didn't recognize Vivian, Lucas's aunt. Lucas noticed what was happening and frantically sent Vivian silent looks, trying to signal her to de-escalate the situation before Mrs. Taylor returned. I think it's best if this young lady leaves the Taylor estate, he said firmly. With Lucas backing her, Sophia gained some courage. A few others, emboldened by his stance, chimed in. We don't welcome uninvited guests here. Who invited you? Leave now. Accusations flew, one after another, with many directing their disdain toward me. And where exactly are you planning to send my guest? Mrs. Taylor's voice cut through the noise, calm yet commanding. She had returned, her gown flowing elegantly as she strode into the room. Emma isn't going anywhere, she said firmly, her gaze sweeping across the room. She's my guest. The room fell silent as everyone's attention shifted to Sophia and Lucas. Waiting to see how they would respond, Sophia instinctively tried to retreat, but Lucas grabbed her arm, stopping her. Don't worry, Sophia, he said, trying to sound heroic. This time, I'll protect you. And just like that, the drama ramped up a notch. Here came Lucas's attempt to play the role of the devoted protector. Lucas, let go of me, Sophia hissed, trying to pull away. Mrs. Taylor's sharp tone made the situation crystal clear to everyone in the room. Emma is my guest. Sophia, I suggest you reconsider your actions. That moment, whispers began circulating through the crowd. Wait, could she really be the Green heiress? I've never seen the real heiress before, but the Green family's CEO is named Green. Isn't he? Mrs. Taylor, always poised, raised a hand to quiet the murmurs. Apologies, everyone, she said smoothly. It seems we have some personal matters to attend to. Please, enjoy the evening. I'll rejoin you shortly. Despite her polite dismissal, no one actually left the room. Everyone stayed, their curiosity overriding any sense of propriety as they strained to catch more details of the unfolding drama. Lucas, Mrs. Taylor said, her voice laced with exhaustion. I can't watch you ruin yourself over this liar any longer. If you're willing, I'll set aside my pride to negotiate a proper match for you. When the time is right, I'll even arrange your marriage. But if you insist on this delusion, I've had enough. I no longer consider you my son. The collective gasp in the room was deafening, and several glasses slipped from guests' hands, shattering on the floor. Disowning her only son in public was the kind of spectacle rarely seen in the elite circles. Mrs. Taylor, surely there's no need to be so harsh, one guest said, trying to smooth things over. Though I no longer harbored any feelings for Lucas, I still didn't want to see mother and son turn against each other. Mrs. Taylor had clearly reached her limit, but I had long since let go of the hope that her arrangements with Lucas would ever make me happy. Mom, you can't do this to Sophia, Lucas pleaded, his voice desperate. Mrs. Taylor turned her back to him, unwilling to entertain further arguments. Her usual grace had been overshadowed by the public embarrassment Sophia had caused. Mom, don't you remember? Sophia saved me that night, Lucas shouted, clinging to his last thread of justification. Sophia, ever the opportunist, seized this chance like a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline. Yes, Mrs. Taylor. It was me who stayed with Lucas that night when he passed out. I took care of him and called for help, she said tearfully, weaving her fabricated story with impressive confidence. There was no one home, so I had to call an ambulance myself. Her tearful performance might have been convincing if not for the glaring inconsistencies. Unfortunately for Sophia, the truth was that Vivian had opened the door for me that night. And it was Vivian who called the ambulance. Vivian's sharp voice cut through Sophia's tale like a knife. I opened the door that night. I called the ambulance. And if I recall correctly, it was Emma who stayed with Lucas the entire night. Not you, Miss Green. Sophia's face paled, her carefully constructed lie crumbling as gasps rippled through the room. Lucas visibly staggered, clutching the table for support. Unbelievable, someone murmured. So she lied about all of it? I couldn't resist letting out a low chuckle. Not just about that, I muttered under my breath. But this is only the beginning. Sophia, now exposed, clung to Lucas's arm desperately. Her teary eyes darted around, but there was no saving face. She had been caught red-handed. Vivian's words carried a finality that sealed Sophia's fate. Miss Green, perhaps next time, think twice before pretending to be someone you're not. Stealing someone's identity is bad enough. But stealing Emma's? You've overplayed your hand. Lucas looked utterly shattered. I couldn't help but think, not so perfect now, are you? He looked at me in disbelief, as though it was his birthright to paint me as some wicked villainess. The more Lucas tried to act clever, the more foolish he became. Vivian wasn't holding back. She unleashed a sharp rebuke at Lucas for his pathetic behavior. If there's a contest for the #1 critic of Lucas Taylor, I'd happily take second place, because no one could ever outdo you in self-sabotage. She spat, her voice dripping with disdain. So this is the real Green heiress? Someone murmured in the crowd. Exactly. How could the Taylor family ever allow someone like Sophia to become their daughter-in-law? Sophia, sensing the atmosphere shifting, attempted to slip away unnoticed, but the bodyguard at the door quickly stopped her. Disheveled and frantic, she now resembled a madwoman, her composure entirely shattered. Lucas's eyes were rimmed red, his mental state clearly unstable. He looked at me with a mix of emotions, regret, pain, frustration. But whatever it was, it didn't matter anymore. There was no way back for us. With the truth fully exposed, I called my father. Within minutes, I had a complete investigation report in my hands. It turned out that the woman Sophia had called earlier was a bartender she'd befriended, who also worked as a receptionist at Green Enterprises. They had conspired in advance to fake Sophia's identity, with Sophia promising her a handsome cut in exchange. Thankfully, the plan had been uncovered before any serious damage was done to my father's company. Once everything was clear, I called the police. Sophia was arrested for defamation and other criminal offenses. Her illegal dealings were revealed in the subsequent investigation. As the sound of police sirens faded into the distance, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. Every wrong she had done to me, every humiliation I endured, justice had finally been served. On the way to the airport, Summer revved up her bright pink Maserati, the engine roaring as loudly as her personality. She had just received her driver's license, and the excitement was still fresh. Her driving, however, made me clutch the door handle tightly. "Slow down, Summer. We're not in that much of a rush," I yelled, trying not to sound too desperate. But Summer, always defiant, gritted her teeth and pressed harder on the gas. "I'm not letting him catch up." "Who's chasing us?" I asked, confused. "That gray car behind us," she replied, nodding toward the rearview mirror. I turned to look. Sure enough, a dark gray Maybach was tailing us. Its presence was unmistakable. "That's Lucas's car," I exclaimed, recognizing the license plate. His serious expression confirmed it. "He made several attempts to overtake us but never quite managed to." "Is your ex-husband chasing you?" Summer asked, half joking. "Focus on the road," I snapped, not in the mood for her commentary. On the city's main highway, our two cars drew plenty of attention as we raced one another. But in the end, we reached the airport first. Boarding the plane, I saw Lucas being stopped outside security, his frustrated expression barely concealed. As soon as we were airborne, my phone lit up with a barrage of missed calls from Lucas. Without hesitation, I deleted his number and blocked him. For Mrs. Taylor's sake, let's make this the last time our lives intersect, I muttered to myself. From now on, you walk your path, and I'll walk mine. Summer leaned back in her seat, smirking. "Wow, Emma, you really don't hold back, do you? Straight up ruthless." I didn't bother explaining the full story to her. Some things were better left unsaid. After all, if Summer ever found out that Lucas had nearly killed me in our past life, she'd probably jump out of the plane and chase him down herself. "Men will stab you in the back without a second thought," Summer said dramatically. "But a best friend? She'll grab a knife and fight for you." Once we landed in Italy, the warm sunshine and gentle sea breeze greeted us. After settling into our villa, Summer wasted no time slipping into her swimsuit. "Out with the old, in with the new," she declared, running toward the beach. "A few kisses from these Italian hunks, and I'll forget everything." I chuckled as I watched her attempt to chat with a group of men using her broken English, which only made her more endearing. Meanwhile, I stretched out on a lounge chair, soaking in the rare sense of peace. As the evening approached, fatigue set in, and I decided to return to the villa early. When I reached the door, I noticed something unusual. The previously empty apartment next to ours now looked occupied. The dust and cobwebs were gone, replaced by a neat and tidy shoe rack. The transformation had occurred in just a single afternoon. Curious, I grabbed a small gift and knocked on the door, intending to introduce myself. Footsteps approached from inside, but no one answered. Strange, I thought. Maybe they're shy, or maybe I just don't look very friendly. I didn't think much of it and went back to my room, falling into such a deep sleep that I didn't wake until Summer flopped onto my bed. "Hey, dinner's here. It's at the door. Did you order it?" she asked, her voice full of excitement. Rubbing my eyes, I mumbled, "Dinner? I've been asleep this whole time. Maybe it's from the neighbors, and they left it at the wrong door. Should we check?" A few minutes later, Summer returned, holding the food in her hands with an expression of horror. "Emma, we're in trouble. Your ex-husband is here." I sat up in shock. "How do you know that? Didn't you notice? The umbrella on the rack outside. It's his." At her words, I collapsed back onto the bed with a groan. Great, he's back. And now we'll never shake him off. For the next few days, nothing much changed. except for the fact that wherever we went, Lucas seemed to follow. He never showed himself, though, which was at least something. Your ex has some self-awareness. I'll give him that, Summer remarked between bites of a cake Lucas had sent over. He knows if he shows up, it'll just annoy everyone. The cake came with a small note attached. Emma, if you like this, let me know. I've already gotten the recipe from the bakery for you. Without a second thought, I tossed the note into the trash. This was the 21st time this month he'd sent me something. Was this his idea of an apology? A desperate attempt at reconciliation? Lucas always lived in his delusional CEO fantasy world, where he thought he could fix everything by throwing grand gestures around. But he wasn't just apologizing to me. He owed that apology to our unborn child, to my parents, who had been forced to bury their daughter, and to himself, for destroying everything good in his life. His newfound sincerity came far too late. It was worth less than weeds. Eventually, Summer and I settled into our new lives at a university in England. Life became more stable. Our days were spent attending classes, while our evenings were filled with shopping, cooking, or watching movies at home. A fellow student from a poetry club asked me out a few times. He was the epitome of a gentleman, tall, handsome, wealthy, and soft-spoken, always considerate without ever crossing any lines. He seemed like the kind of Prince Charming most women dream about. One night, after a casual dinner, he walked me home. A light buzz from a bit of wine left me feeling slightly lightheaded. Just as we said goodbye, he leaned in and kissed me lightly on the lips before I could even react. Goodbye, he said softly, his tone casual. I froze for a second but quickly brushed it off. Maybe this was just how foreigners acted, open and straightforward. I didn't think much of it and still only saw him as a friend. As I approached my apartment door, I noticed a shadow in the hallway. The dim light made it hard to make out who it was. But before I could figure it out, I was suddenly pulled into the neighboring apartment. A strange, warm sensation pressed against my lips, and I instinctively pushed against the person holding me. What are you doing? Let go of me, I demanded. In the pale moonlight streaming through the window, I finally saw his face. Lucas. His eyes were red-rimmed, filled with suppressed emotions that threatened to spill over. Why did you let him kiss you? He asked, his voice trembling. It's all my fault. I know I was wrong. Please, Emma, give me another chance. I'll make it up to you. I'll treat you better. Just give me one more chance. His voice cracked with desperation, and warm tears fell onto my neck. His arms tightened around my waist, making it difficult for me to breathe. This is how you show you're sorry? I asked coldly, forcing myself to calm down. My words seemed to strike him. His grip loosened, and he stepped back, retreating to a corner like a wounded animal. I'm sorry. I lost control again. It won't happen again, he said, his voice barely audible. Lucas, who once carried an air of arrogance and dominance, now looked utterly defeated. But I no longer felt anything for him. Not anger, not pity, not even the faintest flicker of affection. He was a man who would always be ruled by his impulsive, immature emotions. Saying nothing more, I turned and left, shutting the door firmly behind me. From that day on, Lucas stopped hiding. He began openly following me around, no longer bothering to mask his presence. Seriously, Lucas. Summer groaned after days of his relentless tailing. You're a rich, handsome guy. You can have anyone you want. So why are you stalking us? Her tone was sharp, but Lucas simply smiled and continued trailing behind us. Wherever we went, he paid for everything, quietly taking care of our bills. First, we tried to ignore him, hoping he'd eventually give up. But when he enrolled in the same class as me and joined the same club, even I couldn't keep my composure. In a quaint cafe where soft violin music played in the background, Lucas sat across from us during a poetry club meeting. Summer and I exchanged exasperated looks, neither of us able to enjoy the coffee in front of us. Don't you think it's time to give up, Lucas? Summer finally said, her tone a mix of frustration and exhaustion. A flicker of something dark passed through Lucas's eyes. Emma, why is he always with you? He asked, his voice low. That's none of your business, I replied coldly, turning my back on him. He immediately revealed his true colors. his tone sharp and accusatory. But he's trying to take Emma away. You're supposed to be my girlfriend. Po, the poetry club member, didn't understand Chinese. And Summer's English wasn't great. He kept gesturing and whispering to her, asking what Lucas was saying. Chinese? Confused? You can. Summer attempted to explain with her limited vocabulary, waving him off dismissively. I didn't bother responding. Lucas couldn't hold back his laughter as he watched Poe's puzzled expression. For the past few weeks, Lucas had been putting on his best domesticated man act, cooking, cleaning, and practically attaching himself to a mop. The moment he heard we were going out, he'd drop everything and follow us, as though expecting praise for his efforts. Emma might not like the food here, Lucas began, trying to insert himself into the conversation. I made soup at home. When will you be back to drink it? Summer, clearly out of patience. Shop back. We can cook for ourselves. Lucas pressed on. I also made desserts. Your favorites. Emma. As he spoke, he subtly adjusted his sleeve to reveal a fresh burn scar on his hand, the bright red mark standing out against his skin. But no matter how much effort he put in, I wasn't the person I used to be. His attempts at redemption fell on deaf ears. When no one acknowledged him, Lucas suddenly slammed his hand on the table, drawing the attention of everyone in the restaurant. We assumed he was about to lose his temper and cause a scene. But to our surprise, he dropped to one knee and pulled out a shiny object from his pocket. His face was determined, almost desperate. Emma, I've been wrong in so many ways. I've done everything for you lately, even kneeling today. Please, give me another chance. Stop. Just stop. I interrupted, my voice cold. Don't talk to me like you're doing me some grand favor. I never asked you to kneel. I don't care about any of this. Lucas froze, his outstretched hand trembling slightly. I got up, motioning for Summer and Poe to follow. Poe didn't understand the words exchanged, but he had a protective look on his face as he stayed close to my side. Lucas grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Did you sleep with him? He demanded, his voice low and venomous. You never used to reject me like this. His words sent a chill through the restaurant. Whispers began to ripple through the room. You can't force her, someone muttered. That man's expression is terrifying. Should we call the police? Another whispered. He seems unstable. Another voice added. Lucas clearly understood the comments and, not wanting to escalate things further, reluctantly let go of me. As I walked away, I realized something with absolute clarity. Lucas was hopelessly trapped in his own delusions. He couldn't see beyond his own stubbornness, his own need to cling to a version of the past that no longer existed. Later, Summer remarked, Poe's kind, gentle, and charming. Most importantly, he treats you well. There's no reason not to like him. Exactly, I replied. Summer added, her tone sharper. Lucas, on the other hand, isn't in love with you. He's just in love with the idea of getting you back. It's all about his own pride. The truth hit Lucas harder than anything else. Unable to contain his frustration, he lashed out but was quickly subdued by Poe and escorted out. Few days later, he appeared again, dressed to impress, driving a luxury car in some misguided attempt to win me back. But his antics only drew scorn, and a blonde woman scolded him so harshly that he finally backed down. Not long after, the Taylor family cut off his credit cards. Without financial support, Lucas disappeared entirely. Meanwhile, the apartment next to ours returned to its vacant state. The furniture moved out. Summer later told me that Lucas had returned to his home country, where his life had spiraled further downhill. His parents had completely given up on him, choosing to groom a new heir instead. Lucas, unable to adjust to life without his wealth and privilege, spent his days drowning his sorrows in alcohol. As for Sophia, she had married the same man as in our past life, but her old habits of lying and scamming caught up with her, and she was eventually beaten to death by him during a dispute over money. The tattooed thugs who worked for her husband turned their frustrations on Lucas, frequently causing him trouble in the hopes of recovering their losses. When I heard all of this, I didn't know how to feel. This was the life they were always meant to have. As for me and Summer, our lives moved steadily forward. Between school and traveling, We filled our days with new experiences and adventures. My long-held dream of seeing the world, delayed by a lifetime, finally came true. The road stretched ahead of us, and for the first time, I could truly say it was ours to control.